I was heading to a meeting about my husband's inheritance when something strange happened. As I climbed into my car, a ragged-looking man rushed over and yelled, "Ma'am, don't start that engine. It's about your daughter-in-law." My stomach turned to ice. I didn't know what to make of it, but I drove on anyway. When I finally reached the law office, she collapsed right there in front of everyone. That was only the beginning. So, stick with me through this story, and if you're listening, drop the city you're from. I want to see how far my words travel. I never imagined a simple Tuesday morning would flip my world upside down. At 64, I thought I'd seen it all, lived through every storm life could throw at me. Losing Harold just 3 months ago nearly broke me, but I was surviving, one slow day at a time, just the way he would have wanted. At 9 sharp, the call came from the attorney's office. "Mrs. Parker, we're ready to move forward with the estate settlement. Could you come in at 2 today?" The woman's voice was steady, professional, almost cold. Of course I agreed. After waiting for so long, I was ready to close this painful chapter. I picked out my navy blue dress, the one Harold always loved, the one he said made my eyes stand out. He'd given it to me on our 35th anniversary just 2 years earlier. Around my neck, I clasped the pearl necklace he gave me on our wedding day. Then I paused, catching sight of myself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked older, frielier than I remembered. Grief had etched deep lines around my eyes, and my auburn hair had turned mostly silver. The drive into downtown Chicago took longer than usual. Traffic was heavy, and I caught myself tapping my fingers against the steering wheel, restless. I couldn't shake the nervous feeling crawling up my spine. This meeting should have been simple. Harold and I had gone over his will many times. Everything was supposed to come to me first, with provisions for our son, David, and his family later. When I finally pulled into the parking garage beneath the law office, my hands were trembling as I turned off the car. The place felt cold, almost hostile, with its gray concrete walls. I gathered my purse and the folder of papers they asked me to bring, took a steadying breath, and walked toward the elevator. That's when I heard it. "Ma'am, wait." The voice echoed through the garage. I turned and saw a man stepping out from behind one of the pillars. He looked to be in his 50s, wearing worn-out clothes, an old jacket, faded jeans, boots scuffed to pieces. His hair was unkempt, his face weathered, like someone who'd lived too long out on the streets. My first instinct was to keep walking. Harold had always warned me about being alone in parking garages. But then I saw his eyes. They weren't threatening, not wild. They looked worried, even desperate. "Please," he said, keeping his distance, "I need to tell you something important. You're Mrs. Parker, right? Harold's widow." My heart skipped. How could this stranger know who I was? Or about Harold? "I don't know who you are," I said, trying to keep my voice calm as I reached for my phone. "But I need you to leave me alone." "Ma'am, please. I know how this looks, but I used to work for Dawson and Myers, upstairs. They let me go 3 weeks ago. Before I left, I overheard things about your husband's will." I froze. Dawson and Myers was Harold's law firm. The same firm I was on my way to meet with. The man kept glancing around like someone might be watching. "Your daughter-in-law, Megan, she's been working with certain people at the firm. There are documents. She's been arranging things." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" "She's been planning to change your husband's will. She's telling people you're not mentally capable of handling the estate. She's got fake medical records, statements from people claiming you're confused, forgetful." The words hit me like a blow. My hand gripped the side of the car just to stay upright. "That's impossible," I whispered. "I've never been diagnosed with anything. I'm fine." "I know," he said quickly. "That's why I've been waiting here, hoping to catch you before your meeting. She didn't expect you to show up. She told Mr. Dawson you probably wouldn't even remember the appointment." Rage pushed past my fear. How dare she? How dare anyone question my mind? "There's more," the man added, his voice lower now. "She's been forging papers, making it look like your husband wanted changes in his final weeks. She has fake reports saying he doubted your ability to handle money." It felt like I was drowning. Harold had never questioned me about money. If anything, I'd always been the one keeping our finances in order. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, studying his face for any sign of a lie. "Because I liked your husband." He was always kind to me when he came by the office. And because what they're doing isn't right. I may not have much, but I've still got my conscience. I looked at him, this stranger who seemed to have nothing left, and yet was risking everything to warn me. What's your name? Eddie, ma'am. Eddie Johnson. I was a paralegal at Dawson and Myers for 12 years, until they decided I knew too much about their side business. Side business? I asked, stunned. Eddie looked around nervously before answering. They've been helping certain clients rewrite wills and estates, cutting out family members who should inherit, and charging huge fees for it. Your daughter-in-law has been paying them a lot of money. The elevator chimed in the distance, and Eddie stepped back into the shadows. Ma'am, you need to be very careful up there. They're expecting you to just sign everything without looking too closely. Don't let them pressure you. And with that, he disappeared between the rows of cars. I stood frozen for several minutes, my head spinning. A part of me wanted to dismiss his words as nonsense, but deep down, I knew he was telling the truth. I thought about Megan, my daughter-in-law of 8 years. She'd always been sweet to my face, but I'd noticed things over the years, the way she leaned in close to whisper to David when I walked into a room, how she quietly shifted conversations away from me during family gatherings, the little flashes of irritation whenever I talked about Harold and our life together. With shaking hands, I pressed the elevator button. As the doors slid shut, I caught sight of Eddie still watching me from behind a pillar, his expression filled with worry. The ride to the 15th floor felt endless. When the doors opened, I stepped into the reception area of Dawson and Myers. The mahogany furniture and expensive artwork that once looked elegant now felt like bait in a trap. Mrs. Parker, the receptionist greeted me with a polished smile. They're waiting for you in conference room A. I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking against the marble floor. The building was too quiet, most office doors closed, muffled voices spilling out from behind them. Outside the frosted glass door of conference room A, I saw figures seated around a long table. One silhouette I recognized instantly, Megan's slim frame, her hair unmistakable. Taking a steady breath, I pushed open the door. The room was exactly what I expected, intimidating. 3 men in tailored suits sat on one side of the table, and Megan on the other. She looked up, and for just a moment, something flickered across her face. Shock, maybe fear. But then it vanished, replaced by that same sweet smile she'd been giving me for years. "Oh, Margaret," she said lightly. "I didn't think you were actually coming today." The way she said it confirmed everything Eddie had warned me about. "Hello, Megan," I replied, keeping my voice calm despite the storm inside. "Of course I'm here. This is my husband's estate." The lead attorney, a thin man with silver hair and cold eyes, gestured toward an empty chair. "Mrs. Parker, please, have a seat. There are several documents for you to sign today." As I sat down, I noticed Megan twisting her wedding ring around her finger, avoiding my gaze, her eyes fixed on the stack of papers. "Before we begin," I said firmly, placing my purse on the table, "I want to understand exactly what these documents are. My husband and I discussed his will many times. I know what his wishes were." The attorneys exchanged uneasy glances. "Mrs. Parker," one of them began carefully, "there have been some recent changes. In his final weeks, your husband made certain amendments, expressing concerns about—" "Stop." My own voice startled me with its strength. "What kind of concerns?" Megan finally met my eyes, widening them as if in sympathy. "Margaret, Harold was worried about your health. He mentioned times when you seemed confused, forgetful. He wanted to make sure the estate was handled properly." The words hit like a slap. "What incidents?" I demanded. Another attorney slid a folder across the table. "Mrs. Parker, we have documentation of several occasions noted by family members. Memory lapses, confusion about dates, trouble with finances." My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Inside were medical reports, signed statements, even photographs. My chest tightened when I recognized Megan's handwriting on one of the pages, dated just 6 weeks earlier. I read aloud, "Margaret became extremely agitated when asked about grocery shopping. She couldn't recall what she bought or how much she spent. When David tried to help her with receipts, she accused him of stealing." My voice cracked. "This is a lie. I've never accused David of stealing anything." "Margaret," Megan said softly, almost pitying. You did say those things. We were all so worried about you. That's why Harold decided he had to make arrangements. I stared at her, stunned. This woman I'd welcomed into my home, who'd sat at my dinner table, hugged me every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, was now a stranger. What arrangements? I managed to ask, though my throat felt tight. The lead attorney cleared his throat. Your husband amended his will to set up a trust. The estate would be managed by a trustee, your son, David, with provisions for your care and living expenses. The room spun. I clutched the edge of the table. You're telling me Harold didn't trust me to handle my own money? It wasn't about trust, Megan cut in quickly. It was about protection. Harold loved you, Margaret. He only wanted to make sure you'd always be taken care of. I shut my eyes, trying to breathe through the shock. When I opened them again, something caught my attention, a small device in the corner, its red light blinking steadily. Are you recording this meeting? I demanded. The attorneys shifted uncomfortably. It's standard procedure for estate settlements, one muttered. Standard procedure to record a grieving widow without even asking? My voice was sharp. Before anyone could respond, there was a knock at the door. A secretary peeked in. Mr. Dawson, someone's here to see you. He says it's urgent. The attorney scowled. We're in the middle of a meeting. Sir, she said, he says his name is Eddie Johnson, and he has information about this case. I watched the blood drain from Megan's face. She looked like she might be sick. I don't know anyone by that name, Dawson said quickly. Tell him we're busy. Actually, I said, standing, I'd like to hear what Mr. Johnson has to say. Margaret, that's not necessary, Megan blurted, her voice higher than usual. Let's just finish these documents. But it was too late. Eddie stepped into the doorway, looking cleaner than he had in the garage, though still out of place in such a polished office. Mrs. Parker, he said respectfully, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this. Dawson jumped to his feet. Sir, you're trespassing. I'm calling security. Go ahead, Eddie replied calmly. But first, Mrs. Parker deserves to know, I have copies of the original documents. The real ones, before they were altered. The room went silent. My heart thudded so hard I could hear it. Eddie opened his worn messenger bag and pulled out a manila folder. I copied them before they fired me. Your husband's original will from 6 months ago. And real medical reports from his doctor, not the fake ones they wrote up. Megan suddenly stood, swaying. I don't feel well, she whispered. Sit down, Megan, I said, my voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. You're going to want to hear this. Eddie laid out the documents. Mrs. Parker, your husband never changed his will. These men, he nodded toward the attorneys, worked with your daughter-in-law to forge papers. They faked his signature, fabricated medical records, all to make it look like he doubted you. That's ridiculous, Dawson sputtered. This man is disturbed. We have witnesses who heard Mr. Parker's concerns. You mean the witnesses your firm paid? Eddie said evenly. I've got proof of those payments, too. Megan let out a whimper and collapsed back into her chair, pale as paper. Her eyes darted wildly, like a trapped animal. Why? I whispered. Why would you do this to me? Megan's mouth opened and closed before words stumbled out. David and I, we have debts. The house, his business, everything's mortgaged. You needed to steal from me, I cut her off. Eddie slid the will toward me. This is the real one, Mrs. Parker. Signed and witnessed properly. Everything goes to you, just as your husband wanted. My breath caught as I looked at Harold's familiar signature, the one I'd watched him write for 42 years. Tears blurred my vision. How long have you been planning this? I asked Megan. She was crying now, black streaks of mascara running down her cheeks. It wasn't supposed to hurt you. We were going to make sure you were comfortable. The trust would have covered everything. While you controlled every penny, I said coldly. Dawson shuffled papers, clearly trying to hide something. Mrs. Parker, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We should reschedule. No, my voice was steady, strong. We're finishing this now. I looked at them all, the attorneys who'd twisted the law for money, the woman who'd smiled at me while stabbing me in the back. Then I looked at Eddie, a man who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, but still chose to do the right thing. "What happens now?" I asked him quietly. Eddie's jaw tightened. "Now we call the police." He reached for his phone. Megan gave a broken sob and slumped forward, fainting at last. I felt no sympathy. The woman collapsed in that chair wasn't the daughter-in-law I thought I knew. She was a stranger, someone who had been wearing my daughter-in-law's face for 8 years. And I was about to find out just how far her lies went. The police showed up within 20 minutes, though those minutes dragged like hours. Megan had come to again and sat slumped in her chair, not even trying to look innocent anymore. The sweet, caring daughter-in-law I thought I knew was gone. What sat across from me was someone I didn't recognize at all. Detective Sarah Miller walked in, a woman around my age, her eyes sharp but kind. She listened carefully as Eddie explained everything, flipping through the documents he had brought with steady hands. "Mrs. Parker," she said after a moment, "I need you to tell me about your relationship with your daughter-in-law. Start from the beginning." My mind slipped back 8 years, to when David first introduced us to Megan. She was 25 then, a dental hygienist, pretty and sweet, and she seemed to love my son. Harold and I welcomed her without hesitation. She was perfect, I told Detective Miller. Too perfect, I see now. She always said exactly what we wanted to hear, always agreed with us. I thought she was just trying to fit in. But now I realize she was performing. As I spoke, memories shifted, falling into place like puzzle pieces. Things that once seemed harmless now looked different, darker. About 3 years ago, she started with little comments, I continued. Nothing big, just hints that maybe I was getting forgetful. She'd ask if I remembered conversations I knew never happened, or bring up events that didn't exist. Megan's eyes, swollen and red, flicked up to meet mine. "Margaret, I was genuinely worried about you." "No," my voice came out stronger than I expected. "You were planting doubts, making me question myself." Detective Miller turned to Eddie. "Mr. Johnson, what exactly did you witness at the law firm?" Eddie pulled out a small notebook. His voice was steady. "About 6 months ago, Mrs. Megan Parker started coming in often. At first, Mr. Dawson said she was asking about estate planning for her husband's family. But soon the meetings became secretive." He flipped to a page filled with notes. "She brought in documents, supposed medical reports, statements from family and friends, even photographs. They were all meant to show Mrs. Parker as confused or incapable." "What kind of photographs?" the detective asked. Megan shifted in her seat. Eddie glanced at her with disgust before answering. "Pictures of Mrs. Parker at the grocery store, the bank, family events. But always taken from a distance. And the captions were lies. One picture showed her at a checkout counter. Megan's statement said she couldn't handle her money and couldn't finish her purchase. But in the photo, she's clearly just chatting with the cashier while her groceries are being bagged." My fists clenched. The violation stung like a slap. "You were following me, spying on me, taking pictures of me." Megan's voice was barely a whisper. "The lawyers said they needed documentation." "Documentation of what?" I snapped. "Of me living my life?" Detective Miller scribbled notes. "Mrs. Parker, were you aware of any financial difficulties your son and daughter-in-law might have been experiencing?" I shook my head. "David always seemed fine. He has his own consulting business. They live in a big house in Oakwood Hills. They take vacations every year." "All of it on debt," Megan cut in bitterly. "The house has 2 mortgages. The business barely makes a profit. The vacations were on credit cards. We owe over $300,000. The number hit me like a punch to the stomach. $300,000? How? "David's business started failing 2 years ago," Megan said, tears streaming again. "He was too proud to tell you or Harold. He just kept borrowing, hoping he could fix it. Then when Harold got sick, the inheritance looked like our only chance." I stared at her, trying to absorb the words. My son, drowning in debt for 2 years, and he hadn't said a word. Harold would have helped in a second if he'd known. "So instead of asking for help, you decided to steal from me," I said flatly. "It wasn't stealing," Megan protested weakly. "You would have been cared for. The trust would have covered all your needs." Eddie snorted. That trust would have given you $40,000 a year while the rest went to cover your debts. I saw the numbers, Mrs. Parker. They were planning to use your husband's estate to wipe out their credit cards and mortgages while leaving you on an allowance. The betrayal cut deeper than I ever thought possible. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my son and his wife carefully planning to control every part of my life. Does David know? I asked Megan. Is he part of this? She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I had my answer. He knows about the debts, she admitted softly. And he knows we hoped the inheritance would solve everything. But he doesn't know about the fake documents, or the lies about your memory. He thinks Harold really did change his will because he was worried about you. Detective Miller looked up from her notes. So your husband believes his father truly thought his mother was becoming incompetent? Megan nodded miserably. I've been feeding him stories for months. Little incidents he never saw himself. I made him believe Harold was worried about her memory, her judgment. The room tilted around me. Megan hadn't only lied to me, she had poisoned my relationship with my own son. She had made David believe his father had lost faith in me. What incidents? I demanded. Megan sank into her chair. I told him you forgot to turn off the stove and almost started a fire. That you got lost driving to the store. That you accused the mailman of stealing. That you hid money and forgot where you put it. Each word landed like a physical blow. None of that ever happened, I snapped. I know, she whispered. Detective Miller closed her notebook. Mrs. Parker, I'll need you to come to the station for a full statement. And I'll need copies of all these documents. She turned to the attorneys, who had been silent until then. Gentlemen, we'll also be looking into your involvement. Dawson finally spoke. Detective, we only acted on information our client provided. If it was falsified, then we're victims here, same as Mrs. Parker. Eddie laughed bitterly. Victims? You charged them $50,000 to forge documents and create fake evidence. I've got your invoices. The attorney's face went white. That's not. Save it, Detective Miller cut him off. You can explain downtown. As officers gathered evidence, I looked at Megan again. This woman had hugged me, called me mom, sat at Harold's bedside during his final days. Was any of it real? I asked. The dinners, the holidays, the talks we had? Were any of them real? Her eyes filled with tears. At first, yes. When I met David, when we got married, I loved you both. But then the debts piled up, and when we realized what Harold's estate was worth, her voice broke. She didn't need to finish. I understood. Desperation had twisted her into someone I barely knew. As Detective Miller prepared to escort them out, a chilling thought struck me. If Eddie hadn't warned me, if he hadn't risked everything, I would have signed those papers believing Harold had lost faith in me. I would have lived the rest of my life thinking my husband had died doubting me. And his money would have gone to fund the lies meant to destroy me. The thought was unbearable. My legs gave out, and I sank into a chair. But then I looked at Eddie, this unlikely guardian angel. He hadn't just saved my inheritance. He'd given me something far more precious, the truth about Harold's love and trust. Now, I had to decide what to do with that truth. 3 days later, after my statement at the station, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone. David had called 17 times since Detective Miller reached him. 17 times I'd ignored his voice. I wasn't ready to know how much of Megan's poison he'd swallowed. Eddie had stopped by twice, bringing me copies of documents and checking that I was okay. This man, who barely had a roof over his head, seemed to care more about me than my own daughter-in-law ever had. The irony wasn't lost on me. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I checked the peephole. David stood on my porch, looking haggard, his usually neat hair a mess. Megan stood beside him, smaller, weaker than I'd ever seen her. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. Mom, David said, his voice cracking. We need to talk. I searched his face. He looked older than 33, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. Do we? I asked evenly. Please, Mom. Let us in. Let us explain. I stepped aside, not out of trust, but because I needed to hear it from him. I needed to know how much he had known, how much he had played a part. They sat on the couch Harold and I had picked out 15 years earlier. The same couch where we'd welcomed Megan into the family. The same couch where so many happy memories now felt tainted. Detective Miller told me everything, David said bluntly. The fake documents. The forged reports. The lies about Dad's will. He shook his head. Mom, I swear, I had no idea she was doing that. I studied him carefully. But you knew about the debts. His face crumpled. Yes. We're drowning, Mom. The business is failing. We owe money everywhere. I was too ashamed to tell you or Dad. I thought I could fix it before you ever had to know. So when Harold got sick, you started thinking about the inheritance. He flinched like I'd struck him. Not like that. Not the way it sounds. Then how? I pressed. Megan spoke up for the first time since stepping inside. Michael, tell her the truth. All of it. I turned to her, startled. She looked broken, not the confident manipulator from the law office. David raked his hands through his hair. When Dad got the diagnosis, when we knew time was short, I panicked. I thought about what would happen to you, living here alone, managing everything yourself. I looked at him, my voice flat. I'm 64, David. Not 94. I know, David said quietly, but Megan kept pointing things out. Times when you seemed confused, or forgetful. She told me Dad had mentioned being worried about you. My anger surged. What little things? David shifted uncomfortably. Like last Christmas, when you supposedly forgot our dinner plans. Or when you couldn't remember the neighbor's new dog's name. Or when you put the milk in the pantry instead of the fridge. I stared at him, stunned. David, you canceled dinner at the last minute because Megan was sick. The dog's name is Butterscotch. I knew that perfectly well. And putting milk in the pantry once, after I'd been working in the garden for 3 hours, doesn't make me senile. His confusion was real. He glanced at Megan, then back at me. But Megan said. Megan lied. I cut him off flatly. She was crying again, silent tears streaming down her face. I twisted things, she admitted. I took ordinary moments and made them sound like symptoms of dementia. I made you see problems that weren't there. David looked shattered. Why would you do that? Because I was desperate, Megan whispered. Because we were losing everything. I thought if you believed your mother needed help managing the estate, maybe you'd agree to let us handle it for her. Handle things? My voice rose. You mean steal from me? No, Megan protested weakly. We would have cared for you. You'd have had everything you needed. Under your control, I said coldly. $40,000 a year, while you used Harold's money to pay off your debts. David's head snapped up. What are you talking about? Ask your wife about the trust she had the lawyers draw up. Ask her how much of the estate was going to pay your bills while I lived on an allowance. I watched the realization dawn on his face, the horror of knowing he'd been manipulated by the woman he trusted most. Megan, he whispered. Tell me she's lying. But Megan couldn't meet his eyes. The lawyer said it was the best way to protect everyone's interests. Everyone's interests? David exploded, jumping to his feet. You were planning to steal my mother's inheritance. We were drowning. Megan screamed, her composure cracking. Your business was failing. We owed money everywhere. You were too proud to ask for help. I was trying to save us, even if it meant destroying her. The raw pain in David's voice cut through my anger. I saw him realizing how deeply Megan had used his love for me, how she had turned it into a weapon against both of us. David, I said softly. Sit down. He collapsed back onto the couch, looking like a man who had just learned his whole life was built on lies. Understand this, I continued firmly. Your father never doubted me. Not once. His will was never changed. He trusted me completely until the day he died. David broke down then, sobbing like a child. I'm so sorry, Mom. I believed her. I should have known you better than that. You should have, I said gently. But she was very good at what she did. I turned to Megan, who sat staring at her hands. How long have you been planning this? When did you decide I was the enemy? You were never the enemy, she whispered. But when the debts piled up, when I realized we might lose everything, I started thinking differently. Your husband's estate is worth over $2 million, Margaret. That money could have saved us. That money, I said coldly, was Harold's life's work. Money he saved so I could live comfortably after he was gone. You don't need 2 million, Megan shot back, her old resentment flashing through. You live simply. You don't travel. You don't spend on luxuries. That money would just sit there while we lost our house, our car, everything we'd worked for. And there it was. The real Megan. The woman who believed she deserved Harold's money more than I did. The woman who convinced herself that stealing from me was noble because, in her mind, I didn't deserve it. David stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. How could you think like that? How could you believe you had any right to Mom's inheritance? Because she doesn't need it. Megan shouted. Because we do. Because you were too proud to ask for help when we needed it. So instead of asking, you decided to take, I said quietly. The room went silent, broken only by Megan's sobs and David's ragged breathing. Finally, he lifted his head. Mom, what happens now? It was the same question I'd been asking myself for days. My daughter-in-law had tried to rob me with forged documents and lies. My son had been manipulated into doubting me. The lawyers had sold their integrity for a price. But the deeper question was this: could our family be saved? I looked at David, at the genuine remorse written across his face. Then at Megan, still defiant even in defeat. That depends, I said at last, on what you're both willing to do to make this right. The silence in my living room stretched on. David sat with his head in his hands, Megan staring blankly at the floor. I stood waiting for someone to speak, for someone to show me who they really were. It was David who finally broke. What do you want us to do, Mom? I'd spent 3 sleepless nights turning that question over. Did I want justice? Revenge? Or something harder to name? I want the truth, I said simply. All of it. Every lie, every manipulation, every time you chose doubt over trust. David looked up, his eyes red. I'll tell you everything. But Mom, I swear, I thought I was protecting you. Megan convinced me Dad was worried about you, that he wanted to make sure you were taken care of. How? I pressed. What exactly did she tell you? He glanced at his wife, who wouldn't lift her eyes from the floor. She told me Dad mentioned it to her at a doctor's appointment. That he said he was worried about leaving you alone with so much responsibility. A chill ran through me. Megan had been with Harold at his doctor visits. Sometimes, David said quietly, when I couldn't leave work, she offered to drive him. To help him with his medications. His appointments. Slowly, I turned to Megan. You used my husband's illness to manipulate my son. For the first time, Megan lifted her eyes to meet mine. Harold never said he was worried about you. But in those last months he was so weak, so dependent. It was easy to suggest he might be concerned about what would happen to you after he was gone. Suggest to whom? I demanded. To David, she admitted. After his appointments, I'd mentioned how frail Harold was, how much he relied on you. I made it sound like Harold was worried about burdening you. The betrayal pierced me deeper than I thought possible. She had used my husband's final, vulnerable months to plant seeds of doubt in our son's mind. What else? I asked, keeping my voice calm even as fury burned inside me. Megan dabbed at her face with a tissue. I started watching everything you did. If you misplaced your keys, if you asked someone to repeat themselves, anything normal people do, I'd tell David later, but make it sound alarming. And you believed her? I asked David. She was subtle, Mom, he said softly. She never accused you outright. She just made little comments, like she was worried but didn't want to upset anyone. Over time, it felt like there was a pattern. I thought back over the past year. Had I noticed her watching me too closely? Taking note of every small mistake? The photographs, I said suddenly. When did you start following me? Megan shifted in her seat. 4 months ago. The lawyers said we'd need proof if we were going to challenge your competency. Challenge my competency? I repeated, my voice shaking. You were planning to have me declared unfit? No, David said quickly. That's not what. That's exactly what we discussed, Megan snapped, turning on him. Michael, stop pretending. We talked about setting up a conservatorship, making sure your mother couldn't make financial mistakes. David's face went pale. I thought we were just talking about helping her manage things, not taking away her rights. They're the same thing, Megan said coldly. A conservatorship would have protected her and made sure the money was used responsibly. Responsibly? I shot back. You mean to pay off your debts? The debts were crushing us. Megan's voice cracked as she rose from the couch. Do you know what it's like to lose everything? To have creditors calling every day? To know you're about to lose your home, your car, everything you worked for? Do you know what it's like, I countered, to discover your own family plotted against you? To learn that the people you trusted most wanted to declare you incompetent so they could steal from you? We weren't stealing, David protested weakly. The trust would have provided for you. David, I said more gently, seeing the realization on his face. The trust Megan and the lawyers designed would have given me $40,000 a year, while the rest of Harold's estate paid your debts. And when that money ran out, what then? His face fell. There wouldn't have been anything left. Nothing, I confirmed. Your father worked for 45 years, saving and investing carefully, so I'd be secure after he was gone. Her plan would have wiped it all out in 5 years. Megan's face flushed red. Easy for you to judge, Margaret. You've never been in debt. You've never felt real desperation. You're right, I said evenly. But I know what betrayal feels like. And I know what it's like to welcome someone into my family, only to find they were willing to destroy me to save themselves. I wasn't trying to destroy you, Megan cried. I was trying to save my marriage, my family, my life. At the cost of mine. The words hung heavy in the air. For the first time, I saw real recognition in her eyes. She finally understood. David turned toward the window, staring out at the garden Harold and I planted together 20 years ago. What happens to us now, Mom? To our family? It was the question I had dreaded. Could trust so thoroughly shattered ever be rebuilt? The lawyers will face criminal charges, I said. Eddie gave the police enough evidence to prove fraud and forgery. And Megan? David asked without turning. I looked at my daughter-in-law, the woman who had once seemed so perfect. That depends on what she does next. What do you mean? Megan asked, her voice trembling. Detective Miller told me that if you cooperate, testify against the lawyers, and help expose this scheme, the district attorney might offer you a plea deal. And if I don't? Then you'll face full charges: fraud, forgery, conspiracy. Eddie's evidence is strong enough to convict you. Megan sank back onto the couch. What kind of deal? I don't know, I admitted. That's between you, your lawyer, and the DA. But Megan, even if you avoid prison, even if you get probation, this doesn't go away. You tried to steal from me. You manipulated my son. You used my husband's illness to further your lies. I know, she whispered. Do you? I asked. Because minutes ago you were still defending yourself, acting like I didn't deserve Harold's money. Her eyes filled with something like genuine remorse. I was wrong. I see that now. Desperation turned me into someone I don't even recognize. Yes. My voice was quiet, but firm. That's exactly what happened. David turned back from the window, tears streaking his face. Mom, is there any chance we can fix this? Can our family survive this? I looked at my son, the man I had raised with love and trust, then at the woman who had orchestrated it all. I don't know, I said honestly. But I do know what must happen first. They both waited. Megan has to face the consequences. She must work with the police, testify, and accept whatever punishment the court decides. And David, you have to decide whether you can stay married to someone who did this to your mother. David's face crumpled. Mom, she's my wife. I love her. I know, I said gently. But love isn't always enough. Trust is the foundation of a marriage. And she didn't just betray me, she betrayed you. She lied to you, used your love for me against us both. I can change, Megan pleaded. I can earn back your trust. Can you? I asked. Because this wasn't a single mistake. This was months of planning. Months of lies. Watching me live my life while secretly plotting to destroy it. This was who you chose to be. The room fell into silence. Outside, children's laughter drifted from the street, a cruel reminder that life carried on, even as mine had been appended. What do you want from us? David asked finally. I want you both to choose, I said. Choose who you want to be moving forward. People who face the consequences of their actions, or people who keep making excuses. I can't choose for you. I can only decide what I will allow in my life. And I will no longer allow betrayal from those who claim to love me. 6 months later, on a crisp October morning, I sat in my garden watching the Maple Herald, and I planted for David's 10th birthday blaze into reds and golds. Seasons have a way of shifting your viewpoint. What looks fixed in spring can be unrecognizable by fall. Megan took a plea. 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and full repayment of the fees funneled to Dawson and Myers. The attorneys didn't walk away, either. Mr. Dawson got 4 years. His partners drew 2 apiece. Eddie's meticulous notes and steady testimony made sure of it. But courtrooms only close one chapter. Healing has been slower, and it's still in motion. 3 weeks after that showdown in my living room, David moved out. He rents a small place downtown now, trying to figure out who he is without her voice in his head. I keep second-guessing everything, he told me over one of our weekly coffees. Which memories are mine, and which ones she planted? I understood too well. I'd spent months replaying conversations, picking truth out of carefully spun lies. As the divorce wound toward the finish line, David uncovered more ugliness. Credit cards opened in his name, loans against his business, spending she'd hidden for years. The mess was worse than either of us knew. I offered to help. He refused. Mom, I can't use your money to mop up my wife's mistakes. I've got to do this the right way. It hurt to watch, but I respected it. He sold the place in Oakwood Hills, swapped the BMW for a 10-year-old Honda, and has been grinding 16-hour days to rebuild the consulting firm from scratch. There's a steadiness in him now, a kind of backbone that looks a lot like the man I raised. Eddie became an unexpected constant. I hired him part-time to look after the grounds, and he took the small apartment above Harold's workshop. Watching him move from sleeping in his car to living with purpose has been one of the bright spots I hold on to. Mrs. P, he called, crossing the lawn with a tray and 2 mugs. Figured you could use company. He settled beside me. Thanks, Eddie. How are you feeling about today? Today, Megan's probation officer would verify her community service hours. She'd been assigned to a neighborhood food bank, prepping meals and serving folks who are struggling. People like Eddie was, just months back. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I hope she's learning, Eddie said, thoughtful. Desperation happens. Choices are what define you. He would know. He lost his job and his home, but not his compass. Given a chance to profit from wrongdoing, he chose to do right, no matter the price. Have you seen her lately? I asked. He nodded. Sometimes, when I'm picking up supplies for the church. She doesn't say much. Works hard. I think she's starting to understand what real desperation looks like. I wasn't sure how to feel. Part of me wanted her to hurt. A larger part wanted her to grow into someone who'd never do this again. My phone buzzed. A text from David. Coffee later? I've got news. I showed Eddie. He raised an eyebrow. Good news or bad? With David lately? Usually both, I said. That afternoon he came by looking better than I'd seen in months, some weight back on, color in his cheeks. You look good, I said as we sat with fresh coffee in the kitchen. I feel good, Mom. For the first time in years, I'm living my life, not managing someone else's crisis. He slid his phone across the table, a photo of a narrow storefront with Parker Consulting painted on the window. Signed the lease yesterday. My own office. Building it the right way this time. Pride rose warm in my chest. Your father would be so proud. I hope so, he said. I've been thinking about him a lot, what he tried to teach me, the kind of man he wanted me to be. I lost that for a while. We all did, I said softly. But we found our way back. He took my hand. Mom, I need to ask you something. Be honest. Can you forgive me, really forgive me, not just say it because you love me? I'd been asking myself that for months. Forgiveness isn't one act, I said. It's a choice I make every day. Some days it's easier. His eyes shone. I understand. Yes, I went on. I can forgive you. I have forgiven you. You were a victim, too. Megan used your love for me against both of us. It still feels like my fault, he whispered. I should have trusted you more than her. You should have, I said gently. But you didn't, and we can't rewrite it. What we can do is build better from here. What does better look like? Honesty, I said. Even when it stings. Coming to me when you're underwater instead of going it alone. Rebuilding trust one conversation at a time. And if I mess up? I smiled. Then we handle it together. But you're not the same man you were 6 months ago. You know what you're capable of when you're desperate. That knowledge guards you. We sat in easy quiet, both of us measuring the road that led here. What about Megan? He asked at last. What about her? Do you think you'll ever forgive her? I thought carefully. I don't know. What she did was deliberate. She spent months planning to break me, and she took satisfaction in it. She says she's changed. Maybe. People can change. But forgiveness isn't about her, it's about whether I keep carrying anger. I've decided I won't. So, you've forgiven her? I've released the anger, I said. That's not the same as forgiveness, and it's certainly not trust. She won't be welcome in my life again. But I refuse to let her steal another ounce of my peace. He nodded. I think I get it. When he stood to go, I walked him to the door. The sky was splashed with oranges and purples, the kind of sunset Harold and I used to admire from the porch, fingers laced, whispering plans for later years. Thanks for not giving up on me, David said, hugging me tight. Thank you for finding your way back, I whispered. After he left, I wandered the rooms Harold and I shaped over 4 decades. They were quiet, but not lonely. I used to think losing Harold meant I'd spend the rest of my life alone. Turns out, I'm not alone at all. I have people who truly care. Eddie, whose courage and loyalty saved me. And David, working, every day, to become the man he was meant to be. Detective Miller still called now and then to check on me. Even the staff at the food bank, where Megan was serving her community service hours, had become friends after I started volunteering there myself. My life had filled up with purpose. I was tutoring adults at the library who were learning to read. I was helping Eddie expand the garden behind Harold's old workshop. I was working with Detective Miller's department, speaking to other seniors about spotting and avoiding financial exploitation schemes. Most importantly, I had reclaimed my story. For months, Megan tried to write me as a confused, incompetent woman who couldn't manage her own life. But that was never true. I am a strong, intelligent woman. I survived 42 years of marriage, raised a son, built a home, and faced down people who tried to destroy me. That evening, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars appear in the deepening sky. And for the first time in years, I felt complete peace. Not the kind that comes from getting everything you want, but the kind that comes from knowing who you are, and knowing what you're worth. Harold's love still lived here. In the security he had worked so hard to leave me. In the values he had taught David. In the life we had built together. Megan's scheme had failed, not just because Eddie exposed it, but because the foundation Harold and I laid was stronger than any lies she could weave on top of it. I was 64 years old, and I realized I was just beginning the best chapter of my life. 6 months earlier, I wouldn't have believed that. But now it felt like the most natural truth in the world. I was free. And now I want to ask you, listening to my story, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced something similar? Betrayal, lies, and the fight to reclaim your own voice? Share it with me. And while you think about that, I've left 2 more stories at the end of this video. Favorites on this channel, ones I know will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until the end.